Hi, my name is Sofia Bacara, and welcome to Coming Home to Her. First of all, I just want to say that I love a little mic. I think it's so cute and kind of funny and super fun to be like with my little mic. Anyways, I really wanted to talk about my reflection of being home in, where I was born and where I was raised on the island of Maui. And I've been home for a little over a week now, and a lot of things have come up for me. My friends who know me know that coming home to Maui is not always easy for me in the aspect of, how do I explain this? I literally was speaking to my therapist for an hour about this yesterday, and it's something that I have genuinely such a hard time explaining because I think I am still kind of figuring it out on my own. But nonetheless, diving into kind of like the reflections of what it's been like for me to be home in the first week. First and foremost, I want to say that I think that motorcycle who just drove by messed up my mic, but I don't really know, so I hope it didn't. Anyways, I wanted to say that in this first week of being home, it's been quite surreal, I want to say. Every time I come back, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I'm from here. I can't believe, I had the luck of being born here, something none of us choose. And I always am very grateful for where I'm from and, my roots and my friends and my upbringing, etc. And it's a magical place for me and somewhere where I would say I'm very nostalgic and sentimental. I have had every day's been amazing, of course, but I've had some really, really, really fun days so far, and it's only been a week, which makes me so happy. Being with my family, with my parents, prioritizing quality time. It sucks that I only get to see them once or twice a year. And also being with my childhood friends, which is always, such a beautiful and fun time of, now that we've been friends for 20 plus years, having that connection still with each other and, seeing friends that you may see once a year and never really speak to otherwise, and then all of a sudden you see each other and it's like you're back like this together, and I personally think that's such a special thing. And being with my dogs, which I love so much, and the other day my friend and we went horseback riding, and I don't think I have been that happy in a day in a long time. Like, it was so much fun. And so it's so nice, I have to say. Being home is a really rooting, it really grounds me out, if I can say that. Like, being home really grounds me, and it's such a wonderful feeling, I have to say. Obviously, I live on the other side of the world, and that's kind of where I've built my adult life, let's say. But when I come home here, it's so nice to just be a kid again, if that makes any sense. Of course, having lived the different experiences and stuff that I've lived up until now, but nonetheless, coming back home and being able to fall back into that version of yourself. It's always kind of trippy because, okay, where do I start? So let's just dive into kind of family dynamics first. My parents, actually, I've never said this, but my parents got divorced when I was 5, and they both still live here in Maui. But nonetheless, it's been, a challenging dynamic. I think any divorce is difficult, and, no child, it unfortunately happens, but, things happen, and as a child, you can't control that. And nonetheless, being a child of divorce is something that sucks. So I've always kind of struggled in that aspect of, being home and dividing my time with my parents. And beforehand, they've been like, oh, you're spending too much time with this parent or that parent, kind of being annoying. And this year, I'm really focused. I spoke a lot to my therapist before I came home, actually, in the regard to how I want to, let's say, I don't want to say prioritize, but essentially like focus my energy, not in a cringy way or like a hippie airy fairy way, but like, how do I want to look at this time coming home, since I am here for quite some time, which is an incredible opportunity and, something that I don't get to have every year. In the aspect of just very much being present with my parents, and yeah, your parents are always going to irritate you and it's not always that easy, but nonetheless, just enjoying them for who they are and where you guys are at right now. I think that's really been my motto, I want to say, of just not letting myself get upset over stupid things and not let myself stress over things that I have no control of. Because obviously, I mean, we all have our issues, and I think also, speaking on my behalf, as we grow up, we idolize our parents when we're young, because we're young and stuff. And as we grow up, we obviously see their faults as well. And it doesn't mean that they're bad parents or that they're bad people, but it's just a normal, humane thing that we all kind of have our faults. And so really not allowing myself to kind of get upset over small things in that sense. And yeah, very much being present. And for me, for example, my dad loves making dinner for my brother and I. That's something that is quality time for us, or being in the yard playing with our dogs, and with my mom, being at home, going to the beach, going on walks, all of that. Very nice stuff. And I have to say, it's, being in your mid-20s and then coming home, it's such a nice feeling to be taking care of your parents, of having them make nice food for you, etc. And in the other aspect of kind of reflection when I come home, I was talking to one of my childhood best friends, her name is Emma, the other day about this, because how do I explain this? Oh my gosh. In my experience, in my opinion, growing up in Hawaii is something that there's literally no comparison. I think it's funny because whenever I meet people, they're always like, oh my gosh, like I've never met someone from Hawaii, or how is it, blah, blah, blah. And all I can say is it's amazing, it was incredible. I'm so grateful and thankful for my childhood. I literally would not have wanted anything else. And I'm very proud to be from Hawaii. And funny in that sense, when I come home, my European life is like a universe away, and vice versa. When I'm there, it's easy to, I can close my eyes and imagine certain places and stuff, but I think there is a sense of feeling for places that you only really experience, obviously, when you are physically present. And so coming home for me, I always have this kind of dilemma, I almost want to say, of, oh my gosh, what am I doing with my life? Are the choices I made what I want? Am I happy, etc., blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if that's something that other people who live abroad kind of also experience with, or if it's just myself coming home to this very special place that is, incredible in so many aspects and is very grounding for me, and something that I really need. And it was funny, I was speaking to Emma about this, particularly in the aspect of how, what home means to me. And it's funny because obviously it's almost been, 7 years? It'll be 7 years at the end of February since I moved. And that's a kind of a solid chunk of time, especially to be, living literally on the other side of the world. I'm not just a 5-hour flight. I'm like a 27-hour to 30-hour travel time away from home, which is absolutely mind-boggling. And those flights kill me. Not the biggest fan of long-haul flights, but whatever. And what I was saying to Emma is it not that this shocks me, but I guess this is also just me kind of growing up and, let's say, maturing in that sense, is I left Maui with a version of myself, obviously, and a version of other people, my friends and whatever, etc. And that's my kind of experience. Obviously, I come home, or I have been coming home once or twice a year since I left, which I feel very, incredibly fortunate to have the opportunity to do so. And every time I come back home, I come back to that version of when I left. For myself, I dive into, my 18-year-old self who left. And it was really cute the other day. My brother actually, he was like, oh my gosh, like, wow, like this side of your personality is dormant 95% of the time. Like, it's really nice to see you, whatever, it doesn't matter. But in the sense of like, obviously being gone, and having left, I've missed so many milestones and experiences that my friends have gone through, my family has gone through, etc. And it's super sad, I think, to live on the other side of the world and miss out on these small, like steps, or not, I don't want to say small, but just like natural growing steps. And when I come home, not that I forget about that, because, we all are evolving naturally, but that I miss those things, and that I see the people sometimes for the version, and myself, of the version they were and I was at the time I left. And it's kind of like a very mind-boggling thing almost. I would say I'm also a very sensitive and emotional person when it comes to people and things that, I really, really, really deeply care about. And this is one of those things, my friends and family, and just like my evolution in that regard. And also it's funny, I think I come home and kind of forget about everything that I have experienced or I have done, and everything I want to say that I have accomplished up until now, which I'm, obviously very proud of myself, and I love my life. Like, I'm not, speaking down on any aspect in that regard, but I think it's a really crazy feeling to return home to a place that you left as a different version of yourself, and then coming back as a different person, obviously, but also going back to that version of yourself when you left, if that makes absolutely any sense. I don't know. Like I said, can't really explain how I feel, but nonetheless. And also, every time I come home, it's kind of this, I don't want to say push and pull, but I do have, I would say I always kind of second guess myself, if I'm, 100% honest, of like, is this like right what I did? What if I moved home? What would have been my life if I never left? Or what if I just, left for school and then I came back, I don't know, in 2022 or 23, whenever I graduated? How would I be now? And obviously those, I think, at least speaking on my behalf, those are, questions that we can ask ourselves, and, maybe tend to ask ourselves depending on kind of like, yeah, who you are as a person. Sorry, I'm just looking at my phone for my little notes, so because I tend to ramble. But yeah, but it's weird. And also thinking of, what if I were to move home now? Like, would I be happy? How would I feel? Like, what would I do? Kind of questioning myself, because obviously I love my life, and, my life in my new life now that I just moved to Vienna, which I haven't really settled into yet, but we'll get there in the new year. But nonetheless, it's just like, moral of the story is just being from literally a different universe, and then living in a completely different universe too, and, different languages, different people, different culture, etc. And obviously I think that's also such a beautiful thing, because when things are, at least for myself, too still, and I don't want to say boring, but just slow, I get restless. And I would say that I'm quite an adventurous person when it comes to, wanting to learn new things and meet new people, and, let's say, expand my horizons in that sense. And not that I didn't feel like I had that here when I lived at home, but nonetheless, it's just a different place. It's, you're literally in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and it's hard to get to places. It's not just an easy pop over. Let's say if you're in the European Union, obviously more centralized, literally the time to go to New York from Lisbon, or the flying time from Lisbon to New York is actually shorter than flying from Kahului to San Francisco, or for example. Anyways, it doesn't matter. But yeah, just those kind of things. And I would say also I find myself sliding into old habits of, well, one big thing I have to say is like sliding into like the food and stuff. I have to say I love I love local food, and I love one of my other childhood best friends' family's supermarket in the town I'm from. And yeah, just like all those things, the comforting aspects of when you're at home. And I have to say I'm very, like I said, sentimental, and that it's a really nice feeling to have these things again. And also another thing is like my friend Emma and I, we went to this little like pop-up event thingy for another friend who is a very successful and talented artist or photographer. Her name is Celia, and we went to go support her. There was like this, photo printing on these beach towels, and I had so much fun. I had so much fun, and it was so refreshing to see, so many people and I love when I come home, like, literally, you run into, like, 5 people a day that and in one aspect, I don't know if it's annoying, but I don't know. Sometimes, we can all be like, oh, I don't want to see anyone, but at least for me, that's not something that happens, I would say, in my normal life. Sometimes I do run into people, but it's not common. And it gives me such a sense of, my home, obviously, because I run into people I grew up with, or parents of friends and acquaintances, whatever it may be, but, familiar faces. And I think that's something that is so special, especially like being from a beautiful little island that's so rich in culture and language and, history and etc. And I'm, oh my God, I'm like rambling about this, but I'm honestly so grateful and so lucky in that sense. And I think also it's funny because, how do I say this? I have a friend, he always makes fun of me for being so Euro, and like Euro in it's like a abbreviation for European. And obviously, like, naturally, when you live in a place, you adapt to your surroundings and, whatever in that sense. And I'm always like, roll my eyes at him because, it obviously is, normal in one way or another. And definitely, I mean, I love European life. I love the materialistic side of things and, being able to dress up and have fun and, immerse yourself in a new culture, food, whatever, language, etc., history. And I really have to say I love the European way of, being very, I want to say well-educated in the regard of, let's say their horizons are open, and not saying that that's not a thing here, obviously, it exists everywhere. But I identify, of course, of being, adapted to European culture, and I mean, I am half Danish. So, makes sense in that aspect. But also, it's very much important for me to not lose my, my home in the sense of being from Hawaii and carrying that with me wherever I am. And that's just I would say, my connection and foundation in the sense of how I like to be and how I, oh God, how do I explain this? Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm like doing a full-on therapy session with myself. But nonetheless, before I go way too far on a tangent, in the sense of, carrying your home with you and feeling connected to wherever you are, I would say I'm also a person who I adapt, I would say almost too easily, because I get just, I would say I immerse myself, and I really take on like things that scare me, especially being in places where you don't know people and you don't know like the local language and stuff like that. And that's something that really brings me lots of happiness and growth and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But also bringing the part of me that makes me me, if that makes any sense. And not forgetting, how that version of you is. And that's why I think it's also so beautiful to come home and have, these old versions of myself resurface. And it's so fun. Like, when I'm home, I feel so playful. I feel so carefree. Obviously, I'm on vacation. Like, I don't know how it would be if I was living full-time here, how I would feel. But I do, kind of have this sense of, I don't want to say grief, because grief is kind of a heavy word, but nostalgia and confusion to myself of where's my home. And obviously that's such a lucky thing. Like, how many people can say that? But it's also, I think, a very difficult thing mentally and spiritually for yourself kind of to figure out, like, who you are, especially in your mid-20s. I mean, like, I'm definitely not the same person I was a year and a half ago. And we're obviously continuing to evolve. And yeah, I mean, I think the moral of the story is, in this episode, it really emphasizes, I would say, my kind of experience of, what it's like to have, I want to say, like, identity crises of not knowing where I belong, or, what would bring me, which place in the world would bring me so much joy, where I deeply felt like this ticks all my boxes. Obviously, like, nowhere is perfect, and there's pros and cons of every place you are and what you do and blah, blah, blah. But nonetheless, yeah. And I think in this episode too, it really kind of emphasizes on why I chose the title of this podcast, Coming Home to Her, because this is genuinely what I struggle with. And like I mentioned in my intro video, I'm sure millions of people also kind of deal with this in their own way or another. And so I hope that it's a reminder that returning to places that may no longer be your immediate home, let's say on a day-to-day basis, doesn't mean that you've outgrown the place. And it's also okay to feel nostalgic and, have a sense of an identity crisis, because that's obviously, nothing is always perfect. And it's more just like a learning curve and ebbs and flows. I have to say, even my therapist said this, shout out Miriam. She said that she feels that I'm much more clear-minded or headed being home this time. And I have to agree with her, because the other times, I've cried for days. And not that I need to get into that, obviously, but it's nice to come home, and I feel more confident and secure to come home and, be like, okay, this is how it is, this is how I feel. There's no reason to obsess over the emotions that I'm feeling and, the what ifs or whatever it may be. It's just, just acknowledge it, let it flow. Not to sound hippy-dippy, but nonetheless, just cruise and enjoy, and yeah, just really wanting to be mindful with my time and, see as many old friends and people that I can, and, just enjoy the beautiful island of Maui. So yeah, and I hope that, in this recording you can feel maybe a sense of connection in that regard, or an aspect of similarity. If you've ever felt like this, whether you've stayed living where you're from in the same country, town, city, other country, neighboring country, other side of the world, whatever it may be. And it's just, I think it's super important to just shed light on, these difficulties. And obviously everyone deals with their emotions and experiences differently, but this is how I feel. So, yeah. But thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great day, morning, night, wherever you are, and I will see you next time. Bye.